Dr. Judy Chasen is an educator, researcher, writer, and community activist. As a part of Human Relations, Diversity and Equity in Los Angeles Unified School District, she is the voice of the LGBTQ concerns for a district of 800,000 students. Dr. Chasen is also a founder of Gays and Lesbians Initiating Dialogue for Equality, also known as GLIDE, a speakers bureau that conducts over 250 workshops per year about sexual orientation and gender identity. She was recently honored by The Advocate magazine as a 2010 national leader in advocating for educational access for all students. Amy Foster Wolferman serves as the School Safety and National Native Children's Trauma Center Coordinator at the Institute for Educational Research and Service. She provides technical assistance to educators, families, and community members in school safety issues, including positive behavioral interventions and schools and supports, as well as school safety assessment, bullying prevention, suicide prevention, and topics in the field of early childhood. Sharon Hino is a licensed professional counselor with national certification from NBCC. She holds memberships with the ACA and LCA. Ms. Hino is also a member of the NCTSN and the International Bullying Prevention Association. She received her Master's of Education in Counseling from the University of New Orleans and is currently working with Project Fleur de Lis, an outreach program at the Mercy Family Center. Marcy Otten serves as the Coordinator of Research and Service at the Institute for Educational Research and Service, where she works to ensure that grant goals and objectives are met on a variety of IR's projects. Ms. Otten coordinates and provides professional development to early childhood and K-12 school professionals across the state in the areas of school safety, playground safety, bullying prevention, and positive behavior supports. Ms. Otten also serves as a Montana Behavioral Initiative consultant in a partnership with ours and the official Office of Public Instruction. And now I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Judy Chasen.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us today on this very important topic. We appreciate you wanting to join us, because what we'll be exploring today is we'll be looking at trauma, we'll be looking at bullying, and the intersection, how being exposed to trauma can exacerbate students' experiences of being being bullied or being targets of bullying, and most importantly, what we can do about it as professionals. I'm going to begin with a definition of trauma. And trauma is really a physical or emotional response to stressful experiences that compromise a person's abilities to cope. Trauma can stem from experiencing, witnessing, or being confronted with physical, verbal, or emotional abuse or other event that involved actual or threatened death or serious injury. Being exposed to trauma can affect students in many ways, includes the ability to trust, ability to regulate emotion and mood, and ability to effectively problem solve. Next slide, please. We often think of trauma in the society as being the target of child abuse and maltreatment, domestic violence, community violence, criminal victimization, medical trauma, loss, accidents, and fires. But there's also traumatic events that can have their genesis in schools. So we can have school-related violence. We can have bullying, hazing, intimidation. There can be gang violence, threats, also sources of internet. We don't often think of the internet as being a possible source of trauma, but in this age, the internet can be a very powerful delivery model for trauma, as well as information as we know it in social networking. Next slide, please. And we're not just talking about a few kids. In a cross-sectional national telephone survey of children under the age of 18, a sample of over 4,500 students, what we found was just in the last year, there were 10 or more, that children have been exposed to multiple forms of trauma. They've been victimized by physical assault, witnessing violence, property offense, maltreatment, victimization, domestic violence, and sexual assault. And we've had children up to 10 exposures just in the past year of being exposed to these types of traumatic situations. Obviously, we know that this is going to affect their functioning, not only in the home and in the community, but of course at school as well. Next slide, please. Since students do spend the majority of their time at school, we want to look at how trauma can interfere with learning. We know that even a single exposure to a traumatic event can cause all kinds of behaviors that could interrupt the educational process. The students could feel jumpy. They could have intrusive thoughts, interrupted sleep and nightmares. They could feel angry and moody, could withdraw socially, and have trouble with concentration, memory difficulties. Next slide, please. We've actually been able to measure very specifically the effect of trauma on learning. And we know that trauma can decrease IQ. It can compromise reading ability. Students who have been exposed to violence and trauma tend to have lower grade point averages. They have higher school absenteeism, increased expulsion and suspension, decreased rates of high school graduation. So every one of the risk factors that we have in our schools for children are magnified by being exposed to violence. And the research says that violence continues to grow and children are more and more traumatized by this. Next slide, please. With respect to being exposed to trauma and this experience of bullying, it can definitely change the child's experience of bullying. One is that children who have been exposed to violence in their home or in the community may be more likely to engage in bullying behaviors themselves. On the other extreme, they might be completely desensitized to it. They might feel that that type of violence and stressful situation becomes normalized, and they might just not attend to it as well, attend to it in the same ways that somebody else who has not been exposed to violence. On the other extreme, they might be hypersensitive and hyper-distressed. They're becoming re-traumatized by an incident of bullying that happens at school, re-traumatized from what happened at home or in the community. And yet, additionally, they may also be more likely to be the targets of bullying themselves. And so what we see here is that trauma does serve as a multiplier effect over the experience of bullying. I'm going to ask my colleague, Sharon Hino, to pick it up from here, and she's going to tell us what bullying actually is.
Hi, this is Sharon Hino. I'm from New Orleans, and we're going to look a little bit more into what bullying is and the changes and the methods, and a little bit as to how that impacts and what the child with the bullying behavior looks like. As we have evolved in the field of trauma, we now understand that bullying or exposure to bullying behavior can result in the same or similar symptoms of trauma. It is controlled and formulated. It's not an accidental event. The perpetrator of the bullying behavior typically is looking to gain power or put themselves higher in the hierarchy of the student relationship. It's different from normal peer conflict in that in normal peer conflict, both feel remorse, destruction in the relationship, and then have joy again from the resolution of the conflict. In a bullying relationship, the derailing of another student or putting down of another student is the goal of that conflict, and there is no resolution. Next slide. The methods of bullying, we still see the physical aggression. what's reported more heavily in the schools when we go in and do workshops with the children is the covert, those relational, where they use the relationships with peers, the eye-rolling and the taunting, teasing, ignoring. And we've seen also when we illustrate to educators, they do see it, as do parents, and just that recognizing the prevalence of it, how it can impact a student on an ongoing status. The harmful effects of bullying may be exacerbated by the frequency or severity. I know we often think in the school structure that bullying needs to be repeated, but based on the severity of a single event, that in itself can be under the category of bullying or harassment. When speaking with different audiences within the school communities, it is agreed that bullying is not a new concept, but rather its methods have become more lethal. And that really leads us into the cyberbullying, where the use of the modern technologies, which is really a part of the culture of our students, this makes it harder for them to escape the day-to-day interactions and negative impacts of bullying. Methods of cyberbullying include the spreading of rumors through instant messaging, social networking sites such as Facebook, MySpace. We've had it reported as young as second grade. Students utilizing these sites on a regular basis, threatening and harassing someone online, creating hurtful websites. Next slide. We also have discussed and seen that the spreading of rumors, or as they get information online and sharing and forwarding of messages. Another incident that has been an ongoing occurrence is with taking pictures with cell phones and maybe catching someone in a compromising or awkward position and creating what they perceive as a humorous website or a humorous photo opportunity to send out into the community as fun and playful, when we explain to them the context that everyone should be allowed to have the right, whether they're going to be a part of a picture or not. You kind of see that aha moment within their eyes. They really, at this point, need a lot of education around not only how to do the internet savvy and utilize technology, but really the moral and the values behind how it should be utilized. Next slide. It is reported in an average school that a bullying episode lasts 37 seconds. Several would say this is not a very long period of time, but if you put it in the context that if it happens 37 seconds, it probably is happening more than one time a day. And if it's happening one time a day, it's probably happening 5 days a week, 4 weeks out of the month. And if it's happening 4 weeks out of the month, that's on a monthly basis, and for most students, that's 9 months out of the year. This certainly, as you can see, in itself being a traumatic event. It's underreported by students, and they believe it's underreported. There is a code of silence within the school communities, and by this, they're reinforcing the behavior of the bullies. So as later on in the presentation, hopefully we'll be able to illustrate some methods and ways that we can make a more welcoming platform for the kids to be able to report. Next slide. Statistics on bullying shows that 160,000 students report missing school due to school bullying. When children are giving the statistic that many of them see at least one incident weekly, they often report that that number is too low, that it's much more prevalent. 8.2 million students a year are reported being bullied each year. Researchers for Crimes Against Children organization have found that more than 13 million children, ages 6 to 17, have been threatened or harassed online. Students report that in 77% of the cases, the cyberbully is someone they know. This is because the peers have access to them. They're interacting with each other, and they have those manipulative relationships, which they're disclosing information. And once again, when the perpetrator seeks that power struggle or seeks to gain status in a relationship, sometimes that information is used against them. Next slide. There are long and short-term effects of bullying. The short-term probably being more despair and the inability to trust. As you can see, the inability to trust would certainly prevent someone from forming healthy relationships. And as they progress on to more debilitating events in the child's life and into adulthood, other long-term effects can lead to risk-taking behavior, resulting in teen pregnancy, substance abuse, and delinquent behavior. According to the FBI Uniform Crime Report, in the last 20 years, arrests of girls ages 10 to 17 for aggravated assault have doubled. And according to the National Crime Prevention Council, in 2009, it was reported that 60% of males identified as a bully in school were convicted of a felony by the age of 24. Next slide. Characteristics of children who regularly bully. They are impulsive. They do not see things from another student's perspective. They lack empathy, but that in itself is they don't feel or see things from the other's perspective. They often lack in certain social skills, and they have difficulty conforming to rules. Some do perceive violence in a positive way. For many, that violence and aggression is simply a way of attaining what it is they want. Next slide. Family characteristics of children who bully are lack of warmth and involvement. They've learned that the aggressive behavior rather than assertive behavior is a means for attaining things that they need and or want. Overly permissive behavior in parenting, not putting limits on children, pretty much handing over whatever they need or want without any grooming period. Lack of supervision. It was reported that the most dangerous time for teens is from 3:05 in the afternoon until 7 p.m. at night. And when we discuss this with kids in the groups, they often can see that because they get out of school and get onto their cell phones, and then they are not supervised by parents, even though parents are home at 5 o'clock, but typically they're involved with getting dinner ready, going through mail, and tending to household matters. Harsh physical discipline can be a component, and also they themselves can model bullying behavior. We often speak with kids about the importance to report the incident and not seeming as if they're tattling on children, and that getting help for the victim is important, but also getting help for the perpetrator or the person engaging and instigating the bullying behavior is equally important. Often the children who engage in bullying behavior are seen as charming to adults. They have the ability to manipulate and turn situations around in their favor, which is an important thing to keep in mind and consider when you're dealing with reporting situations. I'm going to pass it back to Judy as she is going to go into the victim of bullying.
Thank you, Sharon. I think it's pretty disturbing when we look at chronic bullying, and what we see is that oftentimes there are children who have been the targets of bullying pretty much throughout their school life. That the bullying started when they were very young, maybe in second grade, and continued on up through middle school and high school, where it continued to increase in severity. Plus the cumulative effect of being the target of bullying throughout one's academic life has pretty long-term devastating effects. A person who is going to engage in bullying obviously is going to look for a prime target. Who is going to be the easiest person to bully, one that they're going to experience a great deal of success with? What we see is that targets tend to show clusters of behaviors that increase their likelihood of being targeted. And I'm saying with this with due respect. I never want to sound like we are blaming the victim. But as we go through these behaviors, they are the types of things that maybe we can help our children build the social skills that will protect them from being targets. The first cluster of behaviors are having more of a submissive personality. They tend to be insecure, a little bit anxious. They avoid social contact. They're easily intimidated. That type of lone child who's off to the side and does not know how to engage can look like a prime target for somebody who is looking to engage in bullying. On the other side of that are sometimes students who have provocative behaviors. Those are ones who don't necessarily know how to read social cues. They might inadvertently irritate those around them. They might be tense and irritable, emotionally volatile. They're socially rejected. They don't know how to form those relationships, so they might intrude upon somebody's space, or not realizing that the tapping behavior that they have in class, tapping their pen or shaking their legs or whatever it is that they're doing, is driving the kids around them crazy. Those types of behaviors tend to increase their likelihood that they're going to be targeted. So with that comes is knowing that some students are either engaging in provocative behaviors or they're distant, they don't have those social skills. That raises a flag for us as educators on how do we help our children build those skills for themselves. And we will get into this more a little bit later. Teens who report, next slide. Teens who report having been bullied tend to fall into two groups. About 40% of children are targeted because of their physical appearance. So that might be their weight, their body type, any kind of physical characteristics, their hair color, their texture. Having red hair might be that might make them a target for being bullied. Another one is for perceived sexual orientation, and that is more likely to be males or who are targeted for their perceived sexual orientation, that they are called gay or homosexual. We see that most bullying is sexualized in nature. For the girls, it tends to be making sexualized comments about the girls' bodies or making up stories about their sexual behavior, whether or not they're true. The majority of the time, the stories are completely fabricated, but they are sexualized in nature. So somebody wants a reputation, and so they will make up a story about what a girl did. And then once the story is created, it sticks, and now she has a reputation that is never deserved. Males are as equally likely to be targets of sexual harassment as are females. But for females, it takes the place of making up stories about what their behavior is. It sexualizes them. Whereas sexual harassment for males tends to take the form of ridicule. It may be, again, that a boy is called feminine, he's called a girl, he's called gay. Girls might flirt with him, and then once he responds, they laugh and run away. So humiliating him because of his gender. This is very, very much of a national epidemic, and it's pretty constant throughout the country. And this type of gender-based harassment. Next slide, please. The other prime targets for being targets of bullying are students with exceptional needs. Students may lack social skills. They might be bullied just because they're an easy target. They can be hypersensitive to being bullied, or on the other hand, they could be completely oblivious to it. So you might have a student who is, somebody doesn't want to play jump rope with them, and they'll start crying and say, oh, they're being mean to me, when in fact their peer just did not want to play jump rope. It was not an act of bullying. On the other hand, you might have a bunch of students. There's a student with exceptional needs. Everybody's laughing at that student. The student with exceptional needs might think, oh, look, I have some friends. When the adult realizes, no, they're not your friends. They're laughing at you. They're not laughing with you. That's where the adult supervision becomes so critical. Students cannot always read those social cues. And again, sometimes engaging in behaviors that are triggering for their peers and violating boundaries, touching people's things and such. We find that 100% of children with Asperger's report having been bullied at school. It is a staggering statistic. Next slide, please. Gay and lesbian students are high up on the ranks of being targeted of bullying. And these are not students who necessarily identify as gay or lesbian. It's the fact that they are perceived as being such. We find that particularly males who are a little bit feminine in their appearance, maybe not a little gender variant. The bullying actually starts with them at age 4 from the family, that they have very strong expectations about what a little boy is supposed to do, what he's supposed to like. If he is not engaged in those types of passion at even 4 years old, the harassment and the rejection can begin with the family even at that young age. And it continues on, and particularly reaches its peak in middle school when gender conforming is critical for students. And our children who are not on that pathway are more likely to be targeted. Up to 95% of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender peers, students report being bullied at school. That's staggering. And even more concerning, additionally, is that non-gay youth who are the targets of anti-gay harassment have even higher levels of distress over being the targets of anti-gay harassment. There must be a protective factor in being gay or lesbian themselves, that children who are gay or lesbian have a certain amount of self-esteem, they have a peer group, they have someone who can say, it's okay, we're your friends, we like you. But a male who is a straight male, who is the target of anti-gay harassment, doesn't have any way to defend himself and feels even more distressed by that. Legally, we are obligated to protect all of our students, and we can never justify that type of harassment. And sadly, there are some times it happens that the school will say, well, are you? As if that matters. A, we're not allowed to ask. It's a violation of their privacy. And B, it's inappropriate. Okay, next slide, please. So, Dr. Caitlin Ryan, who is out of San Francisco, did some phenomenal research in 2009, and she was able to quantify the cost of rejecting families. And what she found was that children who are gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender students who have rejecting families have 8.4 times higher rates of suicide attempts, 5.9 times higher rates of depression, 3.4 times higher rates of drug use and unsafe sexual behavior. And of all the groups, Latino males are most vulnerable to family rejection. The good news is that when parents can accept their children, they can affirm them, we find that all of these risk rates disappear, and our young gay and lesbian teens look no different than their heterosexual counterparts. It's critical information for working with parents. Most parents, what they want to do is they want to have a healthy, alive, well-adjusted child. And by knowing that their acceptance of their child is going to help them achieve that, that's what parents want, and so we can help guide them in that respect. I'm going to ask Marcy Otten now. She's going to pick up now what schools can do about bullying.
Thank you, Judy. So what can schools do about bullying? When we've done some research looking at different bullying prevention programs, and they all have really similar elements, and recommend assessing the school climate, creating a committee that can lead the school through the process, taking a close look at the school's anti-bullying policy, or creating one if one doesn't exist, creating clear rules and consequences regarding bullying, training the entire school staff, teaching students prevention and intervention strategies, teaching school staff how to intervene with bullying incidents, and involving families in the prevention process. We'll go into more detail about each of these in the upcoming slides. Next slide, please. First thing we want to do is find out more about where the bullying incidences are occurring in our schools and what we can do to help stop that from happening. So we want to find out if the bullying is occurring on the bus, is it on the playground, is it in the hallways, is it in the bathroom. That way we can put some things in place in those areas. Does the bullying occur more frequently at certain times of the day? Is it before school, after school? during the lunch break. And then we want to find out when the bullying incidences do occur, are the children reporting it to an adult? And if they don't report it, why aren't they? Are they fearing some sort of retaliation, or do they think that no one was going to do anything about it anyway? And then if they do report it, do they feel like it's being taken seriously by the adults in the building and the adults are doing something about it? There are a number of assessments to determine this kind of information. Most are from specific bully prevention programs or curricula. However, it's really easy to create your own assessment. In order to get the most accurate information from the participants, it's important that we let everyone know that names will not be collected and the information will be kept confidential. When assessing the school climate, it's also a great idea to obtain the perspectives from everyone who is involved in the school, from the students and teachers, but also from the bus drivers, playground monitors, lunchroom personnel, and office staff. It's also a great idea to get the perspectives from family members. Family members and school support staff often have insight that we may not have thought of previously. Schools also want to look into some individual student data, such as their office discipline referrals. That way we can verify if some of the referrals could have been coded as bullying incidents and determine which students might need more specific interventions. When collecting the data on an ongoing basis, we can determine if our school bully prevention efforts are working and where we need to put some more interventions in place. Next slide, please. We also want to look at effective anti-bullying policies. So when we're developing or revising policies as part of a school-wide response, we want to make sure that we have some information in there that provides the mission for the school's commitment to creating a safe, caring, respectful learning environment, as well as providing the school community with a clear understanding of what the school is doing to counter bullying. Well-developed policies include a clear definition of what bullying is and provides examples. When others read the policy, there shouldn't be any guesswork involved in determining the definition. Policy should also include expectations for the students and for the adults in the building. Some examples include: we will not bully others, we will report bullying, all reports of bullying will be taken seriously and followed up on. Good policies also include information on the consequences that will be imposed for bullying incidents, starting with the least intrusive consequence, such as a warning and reteaching of the rules for the first bullying incident, and gradually getting more intrusive, such as in-school suspension, short-term out-of-school suspension, or expulsion for those repeat offenders. However, it's important to note that in-school suspension or expulsion by itself does not solve the bullying problem. It stops the behavior in the immediate, but it does not teach the student what to do instead. So when we get to the place where we have to use in-school suspension or expulsion, we need to make sure that we are coupling it with teaching some replacement behaviors. It's also recommended that a statement prohibiting retaliation against those who report bullying be included in the policy, along with the consequence that a student will face should they disregard the retaliation rule. We want students to know that it's safe to report bullying incidents and that the adults in the building will help them when it does occur. Next slide, please. We need to let students know that what is expected of them. Be safe, be responsible, be respectful are all broad, overarching expectations that we want children to know and do. But we also want to give students specific expected behaviors when it comes to bullying behavior. When children know the expectations and are consistently reinforced for engaging in appropriate behavior, they will be more likely to engage in that behavior. However, despite our efforts in reinforcing appropriate behavior in order to help reduce bullying behaviors, we know there will be times when students will still bully. Therefore, it's important to identify the consequences that will be implemented and train all school staff to apply them with consistency. Again, we want to make sure that consequence has a teaching element that will support the student in behavior change, such as teaching the school rules regarding bullying to students in a younger grade, or putting the student in charge of looking for acts of respectful behavior from other students on the playground. Next slide, please. We also want to make sure we provide training to all the staff. Often what happens in schools is that teachers, counselors, and the administration receive training in bullying prevention and intervention, but the rest of the school staff is left out of the loop. Training all school staff, including lunchroom staff, playground supervisors, custodians, and office staff, is an important element in school-wide bully prevention. This group of people may be the ones who see bullying more often, as they are the ones who are in the areas where most bullying takes place. Every adult in the building should have a clear understanding of what bullying is, what types they are likely to see or have reported to them, what strategies the school is implementing to prevent bullying, and how to handle a report and apply the consequences. When all the school staff is on the same page, bully prevention efforts will be more successful. Next slide, please. Although we hope that students come to school with a wide range of appropriate skills, we know that not all students do, and will have to teach those skills. All students in the school will benefit from social skill instruction, not just the students who haven't learned them yet. Many schools have existing social skills curricula that have lessons to teach skills such as friendship, empathy, cooperation, emotional regulation, problem solving, and conflict resolution. We want to teach students these specific skills because we know that if children have at least one friend, they are less likely to be a target for bullying. And if students learn empathy, they will learn to be more likely to step in when they see a bullying incident. Likewise, if they learn cooperation and problem-solving skills, they will be less likely to engage in inappropriate behavior. All of these types of lessons can be easily incorporated into regularly occurring class activities. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn it over to Amy, and she's going to talk a little bit more about some other components of what we can teach students regarding bullying.
Thanks, Marcy. I want to start by saying that most of what I'm going to cover here, the material comes from the program called Steps to Respect Bullying Prevention Program. It's from the Committee for Children out of Seattle, Washington. Both Marcy, who just spoke, and I were trained in this several years ago, and it's not unlike other programs out there based on the same research as many of them are, such as the Olveus program, but we really like it because it aligns with the positive behavioral interventions and support model well. So this first slide, teaching children to recognize, refuse, and report bullying. It's important for staff to come to a consensus about what bullying is and what it's not, and Sharon talked about that before. It's also important for students to learn the same definition. We want to teach kids the difference between what is normal peer conflict and what is bullying. Again, bullying is that imbalance of power. It's the intention to physically or psychologically hurt a target, and the students involved do not work out their conflict when it's over. When children are in normal conflict, they tend to take turns being the one in power, and they'll eventually work out their conflict, or at least they'll make an effort to. Also, children who are being bullied don't always realize that what's being done to them is wrong, and they may think they deserve the treatment. So teaching them and others around them what bullying is can help move them and others to action. So recognizing refusing, we want to teach children how to refuse bullying in a safe way, when it is safe to speak up in a bullying situation, and when it is better to go get help immediately. The Steps to Respect program, again, recommends teaching that there are 3 times when a student should report bullying to an adult immediately. First, if someone is in danger. Second, if someone is teaching or showing private body parts. And third, when refusing is not working. A child should also report right away if they do not feel safe for whatever reason. Maybe they're being ganged up on or no one is around. If the child feels unsafe, they should go get help immediately, or they may want to ask a nearby student to get help for them. Students can role play and practice how they would ask for this help. If the child does feel safe to refuse bullying, there are several steps they can take. First, they should check their feelings and decide whether or not they need to calm down before trying to refuse. We want kids to know it is normal to feel scared, hurt, or upset if they are being bullied, but we don't want to let their emotions completely control their behavior. Second, they should use assertive behaviors. We teach kids that assertive behaviors are not aggressive behaviors. Being assertive means expressing thoughts in a clear, honest, strong, and respectful manner. It includes standing or sitting tall, holding your head high, looking straight at the person who is doing the bullying, saying clear, strong words that mean stop, and also labeling what's going on. That's bullying. This communicates the importance of what is being said, and if you sound confident and serious, your message will be stronger. Finally, we want to teach kids to walk away calmly. Teaching this to all students and providing opportunities to practice helps them develop and use important assertiveness skills. And with reporting, we want to teach kids the importance of doing it, of reporting, and also how to do it. We want students to know that adults need to know that bullying is occurring so that they can help make the school a safer and more respectful place. Everyone is responsible for helping solve this problem. Next slide, please. Bystanders are really the key. Responsible behavior by bystanders is essential to decreasing bullying. Bystanders can use the power of their friendships as a protective buffer for people who are targets of bullying. They can also discourage peers from bullying others. Bullying often occurs in group settings in which peers become witnesses. An estimated 85% of bullying incidents among children take place in the presence of other children, but they rarely intervene in a constructive way. So bystanders have the power to affect any bullying situation. We want to teach them to recognize their own role in perpetuating bullying situations, to refuse to watch or allow bullying to happen, to speak up assertively if they feel safe to do so, to ask for help if they need it, to make a report so that adults know what is going on, to help the child who's being bullied by talking privately with them and letting them know they care, to recruit others, to walk away or get help, and to not participate in rumors. Again, all of these skills can be taught directly and practiced with students. Next slide, please. When bystanders already know and have a positive attitude toward a student being picked on, they're much more likely to try to help them. One way of building these bonds of caring is to create a peer welcome committee to orient new students to school and to provide social companionship for the first several days of school. The welcome committee can give tours of the school and explain the school schedule. This may only take a few days, but it really gives the child a head start in building friendships that can protect against bullying that may come up. Anytime you can arrange a learning or social situation in which older students interact in a positive manner with younger students under adult supervision, you forge bonds between those age groups and give older students a reason to wish to protect their younger counterparts from being bullied. Group ambassadors are another way to help building those bonds of caring. They're helpful when students are together in groups with limited adult supervision. They can welcome kids who join a group, such as at a table in the lunchroom, and they can intervene with any problem situation. We want to teach students how they can be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. Next, please. If we're teaching students to report bullying to us, we need to have a way to respond to these reports. Having a simple response that all staff can use consistently is important. The Steps to Respect program, again, teaches the 4A response process: affirm, ask, assess, and act. First, we want to affirm the child's feelings by saying something like, "You're right to report this to an adult. Thanks for sharing this information. I can see it's really upsetting for you." Next, we want to ask questions and gather information. Tell me more about what happened. Has this happened before? Who was involved? When did this happen? We also want to make sure we assess the child's safety. The child making the report fearing revenge. Could the bullying extend to other settings, such as on the bus or after school? Talk to the child about what he or she needs to feel safe right now. Do they need a buddy to walk home with or be picked up from school? Something like that. And finally, we need to take action. This includes documenting the situation, A standard bullying report form can be used that documents the who, what, when, and where of the situation. Action also includes providing a consequence to the child who bullied, and by consequence I mean an intervention, an opportunity to teach. We want to build skills in children rather than simply apply a punishment that only works to stop the inappropriate behavior in the moment, but does not teach the skill that the child is lacking. Finally, we want to act by making sure the student who is being bullied and the student who is doing the bullying participate in individualized coaching sessions. Coaching may not be necessary in every case, but it's an effective way to help students address the problem and make changes to improve the situation. Next slide, please. Normal conflict often means bringing students together to problem solve, and this is very effective in those situations. However, in bullying situations, it is highly recommended not to put the child who is bullying and the target together because of the power differential that exists between them. Putting the students face-to-face may put a child at risk for greater harm, and that is why it's imperative for children to be coached separately. During coaching, there's potential for confrontation and defensiveness. What we want to do during coaching is think about how we can help support the child in changing his or her behavior, whether the child is doing the bullying or being victimized. Both of them have needs and need that support. So when we're coaching the student who was being bullied, here are some general guidelines. The first thing we want to do is affirm the child's feelings. It helps validate the importance and seriousness of the situation, and it may help the child feel more comfortable talking with you. You might say something like, "You are right to report to an adult. I can see this is very upsetting for you." These statements can help combat the children's feelings of reluctance to report and demonstrate that you will provide that support. It's also they're more likely to report again in the future if you affirm their feelings without judgment. Next, we want to ask questions about the current experience and any past experiences with bullying. And we want to identify what has and has not worked in the past. Actions that have worked could be incorporated into a new plan, and those that have not can lead to brainstorming other actions that could. Then we want to generate solutions for the future and create a plan. We want to help the student think of strategies they can try in the future to avoid the child who is bullying them. Some examples include always staying with friends, getting a family member to transport them to and from school, eating lunch in the office, and other ideas like that. We may need to coach the student in the use of assertive refusal skills if that is an area of concern. We really want the student to identify others who can support him or her, like a friend, a parent, a teacher, and to create a plan. The more involved they are in creating the plan, the more likely they are to follow it successfully. The last step is to follow up with the child and support their use of new solutions. Set a time when you will check in to see how the plan is working and encourage the child to report to you as needed. We might need to contact the child's parents or refer the case to a counselor or administrator if it is a more severe or chronic case. When we're coaching the child who's doing the bullying, we follow very similar guidelines. First, we want to identify the problem in a way that the student does not know where you got the information. We never want to identify the reporting students. We want to keep it vague and make it sound like we've heard it from several people. I've been hearing that you and Susie are having trouble getting along. Tell me about that. Many students have told me that you've been pushing Susie in the hallway. After identifying the problem, we want to ask questions and gather information. I'd like to hear from you what happened. Tell me about this from your point of view. Asking them for their perspective lets them know that you care about what they have to say. Next, we want to apply consequences or intervene with the behavior. The goal is changing behaviors, and consequences are part of the solution. We want to select consequences that will help teach the missing skills. It's helpful to withhold judgments of blame and really focus on helping students adopt positive behaviors that avoid bullying. The consequences should tie also directly to the school bullying policy. Next, we want to generate solutions for the future and create a plan. We want to discuss with the student how he or she can avoid bullying in the future and create and agree upon a concrete plan that is written down. Again, the more involved they are in creating the plan, the more likely they are to follow it successfully. We want to encourage the student to replace the bullying behavior with another behavior. For example, when she feels like bullying, she will come talk to you or to the counselor, or run around the playground or tell a friend how she feels, instead of engaging in bullying behavior. We can start this process by asking, what are some ways to prevent this from happening again? And we may need to offer some suggestions. The last step is following up, which is crucial. We want to see how the plan is working and check in frequently to see which solutions are being used. Children are much more likely to change problem behavior if we help them select positive alternative behaviors and provide consistent feedback on their progress. We also may need to contact parents as appropriate or make a referral to a counselor or administrator if the case is chronic or severe. Next slide, please. Our efforts to prevent bullying are going to be much more successful if we collaborate with families. We want families to know that we are addressing bullying and how we are doing so. The more they know about what bullying is, its impact on children, and the specific skills we are teaching our students, the more likely they are to reinforce our goals. It's also important for families to know what specific behaviors we view as inappropriate and unacceptable, and what the consequences or interventions will be, including an understanding of the coaching process. If a child is bullying, they need support in changing their behavior. We want the child's family to know and believe that we truly want to support their child, not just punish and exclude them. If we have worked on creating positive relationships with families all along, it will be much easier to collaborate with them when we come across difficult issues. We want their help in the process. I think all too commonly, families with children who have more challenging behaviors are used to schools sharing negative reports about their child and getting phone calls addressing problem behaviors. It is much less common for these families to receive positive comments about their child. This understandably creates a belief that the school does not care for their child's well-being. Developing supportive, trusting relationships with families opens the door for collaborative problem-solving and change. We also never want to bring the family of the child who bullied together with the family of the target. This can be disastrous. It is much better to work with each child and family separately and privately in a supportive manner. Next slide, please. So our challenge is not an easy one. Our challenge is to foster understanding, empathy, and compassion for things that may be outside of our students' experience. How do we do this? We teach directly what it means to be empathetic and compassionate. We provide examples, we model, and we provide children with opportunities to practice these skills. We build a school climate that expects and encourages these ways of being, and we do not tolerate or overlook situations in which people are disrespected or poorly treated. We promote and practice being supportive and nurturing, and we intervene and protect each other when it's necessary. Next slide, please. In conclusion, we all need to work together to create this kind of climate. We model, teach, and encourage the behaviors we want to see and be immersed in, and we recognize when students need our help and actively intervene and support them. That's the end of our slideshow presentation, and I believe we have approximately 30 minutes for questions and answers.
Yes, thank you very much. We will now move into the question and answer portion of the event. Again, those joining us via the web may present a question by clicking on the bubble icon in the upper left corner of the screen, and those joining us by phone can send an email to question@nctsn.org. I'd like to ask the presenters if there are any closing comments that you would like to make.
This is Judy Chasen. I just really want to acknowledge my colleagues here. I hope that this has been a valuable presentation for you, the audience, and I'm very grateful that you're joining us because this is such an important topic. Protecting our children and helping them feel engaged in their education truly changes their lives and affects us for generations. So thank you for being here.
All right, I will begin with the questions. What is the difference between bullying and teasing?
This is Amy. I can address that. I think it goes back to that definition again of how bullying is that repetitive, intentional harm, that imbalance of power, whereas teasing is not necessarily repetitive. It could happen at one time. It could be done where there's a real sense of balance and power between friends, and they're just engaged in teasing at the moment, but they never come back. If it's actually bullying, they never come back to that balance. And that intention to harm is not as severe with teasing. Anyone else like to add to that?
Was it Sharon who said that that if there is some harm that happens because of the teasing, that there's an attempt to heal, and that they will want to go back and they will want to repair the damage? We all mess up. We all slip up and say things that or do things that hurt our friends. And if we value the friendship and we do not want, and our intention is not to bully or humiliate, we try to repair that and go back, do corrective actions. So I think that's a critical part of differentiating between bullying and teasing.
And I think it's important also to mention, because the children will fall in the trap. They will do it, and then they'll have the disclaimer that they're just joking or they didn't mean it. And sometimes, as Judy said, that normal peer conflict, they mess up, they say something, both feel the remorse and then both feel the joy of the union again. But in the bullying, the just joking is that manipulation, but the hurt is still intended and inflicted.
Okay, the next question. How can I respond to school staff who believe that bullying is simply a rite of passage and don't think that addressing bullying is their responsibility?
Well, this is Judy Chasen, representing a school district. There are really two ways to have the conversation. One of them is the legal part. You know, as an employee, all teachers are employees of school districts. School districts have policies. We are obligated by law to protect our students and to ensure that they are in a safe and affirming educational environment. That is the law. That is the terms of our employment. That is what we must do. Individual beliefs about such things take the back burner to what one's job responsibilities are. In California, a teacher who is intentionally indifferent to any instance of harassment or violence or any harm to a child can be held accountable. They could actually lose their teaching license. They could be prosecuted. It is similar to mandated child abuse, except that's federal. So it's not nearly as severe as the child abuse is the federal guidelines, but we do have state guidelines that teachers cannot be indifferent to children being hurt. That's the legal conversation. Now we can couple that with an ethical conversation, and our ethics tell us what we should do. Most teachers know how to speak from the heart. They know what to do, or they at least feel something when they read that child's journal, and their heart sinks, and they say, "Oh my goodness, this child is in a lot of pain." So we can put people back in touch with their heartstone. Remember, this is a child. They are in pain. They are suffering. You're an adult. You're a caring adult. They trust you. These are different languages in some way. We have the legal language and the ethical language. They both direct our work as educators. And it's very helpful as a school administrator to be bilingual, to be able to speak both of those languages, the legal one and the ethical one, so that whatever adults we're working with, that we can use the language that's going to resonate with them. So whether it means we're going to touch their empathy or we're going to touch their job requirements, we communicate in the language that's going to propel them to act.
And this is Sharon Hino. I can also say in a number of in-services we have done in just bringing awareness and bringing it as one of those critical topics. Teachers are constantly coming to meetings and educators on growth and development of the children, this being presented as its own topic and really showing them the relational component. I've had teachers that say, well, we address the physical stuff. But, really, and when you lay out what the relational and what the verbal and how it can escalate to the cyberbullying, and now I know in the state of Louisiana there are legal ramifications that the schools are bound by. They really are engaging, but a lot of it is bringing that awareness and having that conversation with educators.
I think those were both excellent responses to that question. This is Amy. Sharon, what you were just saying, often the clarity of the definition and the impact of bullying is just not known. So when a report is made, if the adults understand how that is truly impacting children, like we mentioned earlier in the presentation, I think that might move them to more of that ethical concern. In our state, it's unfortunate, but we've had several school staff share with us after or during a bully prevention training that oftentimes it's the staff members or teachers who are participating in the bullying, and there is a lot of denial around that. So I could say, education again about what it is, what it is not, and its real impact on the students and not only their well-being but their academics.
Okay, thank you. The next question. How do you address bullying when you know the bullier has had a traumatic background?
This is Sharon. That again, as I pointed out in my part of the presentation, oftentimes they do need help, and their behavior in engaging in the bullying behavior is a cry for help. So if you can intervene, we try to get the students to stand up or try to stop the behavior. But if it gets to the point of reporting to an educator and then it needs to go beyond that, and it may go to the guidance counselor or social worker or school therapist, and the referrals just kind of follow. But once again, it's validating the initial report and following through, as Amy had said in her part of the presentation.
I have a question about the question. Can you read it one more time, or was it about the person who's doing the bullying or the one being bullied?
It's how do you address bullying when you know the bullier has had a traumatic background?
Okay, thank you.
This is Judy speaking. I think that most behavior is purposeful and intentional, and it serves a positive purpose for the person who is doing it. So, as Sharon was saying, is that, why is the child engaging in bullying? Sometimes they're engaging in bullying because, for them, the best offense is a good defense. It may be that they don't have alternative behaviors. It could be that they want to achieve some kind of social status and they don't know how to do that. I think that's where the diagnosis is so critical. It's easy for us to be judgmental and say, that's the big bad bully and we're just going to lock them up, when in fact they are just as much of a victim of their circumstances as the child who is the target of it.
Absolutely.
This is Marcy. I would also add to that when children are engaging in bullying behavior, whether they've been traumatized or not, they still need to be taught those replacement skills. And so the more that we can do that and teach them how to meet their needs in a better way, the better off we'll all be.
How do we best support children who have been processed out of the school or are in alternative situations?
You mean like continuation schools?
Yes, and the continuation question off of the previous question is separation from peers is helpful for short term, but what about long term?
This is Sharon again. Is that in reference the child been expelled from school
Yeah.
due to bullying behavior?
Yes.
Okay. From my perspective, that's where that follows through. If it has gotten to that point, a referral, it's gone to administration, the school social worker or counselor has have documentation. Hopefully there's been a referral to an agency or provider in the community that is working in therapy with the child and or the family as a whole.
And hopefully there are some goals that are so that the child and the family are working towards, being put back into the mainstream situation. So because it's not being isolated like that, they're not going to have the opportunity to develop and work on those skills that they need to build. So having those goals to work towards and that follow-up, like Sharon said, to check in to see what their progress is like.
And I can share that I have had, and I think some other professionals in the community, some of those referrals do come from parents and schools that the child engaged in the bullying behavior, their staying within the school is conditional upon therapy. So it's having all those pieces put in place and the goals, as Marcy had just said, to make sure all those components are addressed and that hopefully the child can then return to mainstream.
Okay. Next
Sometimes
question.
those smaller settings really provide a wonderful opportunity to have very directed lessons. It can be infused in every aspect of the child's day in those small settings that sometimes we can't achieve in the larger setting because there's so many students and they come in contact with so many adults during the course of their day. So a smaller setting like that can really be a healing for children. They can form close relationships with adults who spend the entire day with them. And they get that kind of bonding. They get a way to learn to form relationships in a more positive way. And they're known. They lose the anonymity that you have in a larger campus.
This is Amy again. Several of the schools that we work with have taken their in-school suspension and turned it into a setting like you just described, Judy, where they're, what are the skills that we need to build and work on? Let's do it as a small group. It's not safe right now for this child to be in with their peers, so we'll do this in-school suspension short term and address those, making that connection with the adults, building that relationship, and really working on learning and practicing the skills.
Next question. Does the term bullying end up covering up or minimizing what is actually bigotry, discrimination, or hate crimes? Should acts of prejudice toward one student that indirectly impact all students of that minority group be treated differently than bullying?
This is Judy. I'm going to jump in on that one. Absolutely. Bullying does exist on a continuum. And on the lower end of it, it could take the form of teasing that was insensitive and thoughtless and really needs some fairly easy intervention to correct it. On the extreme end of bullying, absolutely, it could rise to the level of a hate crime. And any place that the bullying does intersect with violating the rights of somebody, one of the protected categories, it could be a hate crime and absolutely should be treated as such. It could rise to the level of sexual assault. It could rise to the level of physical assault. We need to look at the full spectrum of bullying. So thank you for bringing that forward. I think when people catastrophize or minimize bullying, they're probably thinking of one end of that spectrum. So somebody who's minimizing it is going, oh, it's just teasing. Because sometimes it is just teasing, in which case it doesn't meet that criteria. And on the extreme end, a very critical incident, we would not want to dismiss it as just teasing because it could be a criminal behavior. We may need to call law enforcement. We may need to call children's services. And we have to deal with it appropriately.
I think, too, this is Amy, not only is there this continuum of the actual behaviors, but the continuum of a lifetime of bullying. So those, I think it's Dr. Deborah Pepler that talks about this, starting out with bullying on the playground and leading towards marital abuse and child abuse and those kinds of behaviors if it's not dealt with early on in one's life.
Thank you.
If
Sorry,
the
go ahead.
school finds that there is bullying that's happening because of association with a particular group, so it could be that the school is really dealing with racial tension. The school is dealing with homophobia. The school is dealing with other kind of intergroup bias, intergroup relationships. Then the school has the opportunity to work systemically with the entire population at large and saying, what is it that is happening between these two identified groups that we have this type of aggressive rivalry, and this now we have a pattern of intimidation and harassment and bullying. And then the school can take that and do huge educational sweeps and look at everything that's going on in their own practices and policies and what is allowing that to flourish.
And that's really where they need to define explicitly, these are the behaviors that we expect, we promote, and these are ones that we will not tolerate and we will intervene with. And oftentimes I think schools have great ideas about what their expectations will be, what their response will be, but the actual teaching of those behaviors is where we sometimes miss.
Any other responses to that question? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next one. What can a parent do if they know their child is being bullied?
This is Amy, and I think that the parent needs to definitely have a discussion with the school administration, maybe the school teacher to start with, and then bring it to the administrator's attention. Really just sharing the situation, what they're hearing at home, what's happening, and also trying to hold them accountable without being, I think it's easy to feel like the school is not doing their job because we care so much for our own child. We want to protect them, but if we can try, I was talking earlier about how we can try to build positive relationships with our families so that they can come to us or we can go to them when there is a harder issue, a difficult issue, because then there's that trust and they know that you care. Because oftentimes the staff, it's not so much that they don't care, but they don't recognize the situation or understand the impact, the seriousness of it. So having that opportunity for discussion and just moving, starting with that open relationship, the positive relationship, and the discussion, and then of course, kind of educating themselves in how they can help their own child with those assertiveness skills, problem solving. How can you avoid the bully? What are some things that the child can do themselves to prevent that situation? I'm sorry about the noise, if you can hear that. Some basketballs occurring up above me.
Okay, next question.
We have, excuse me, I'm going to hop in for 1 second on that too. We have particularly with parents of special needs children, to generalize, they tend to be exceptionally protective of their children. They're really going to want to watch out that they aren't the targets of bullying. And so those parents those are the ones that we're going to hear from most frequently. And so it might be helpful to help the parents develop the social skills in their child that will establish some kind of resiliency, make them less attractive to bullying as well.
And I think that's where that direct teaching of that response, exactly like you're saying, when you're engaged in a situation, to check your feelings, walk away calmly as opposed to, crying and bent over. Just those real specific. Check your body, check your feelings, practice your voice, all of those skills.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm going to move on to the next question. What if the target says that bullying doesn't bother them, that their friends are just messing around with them?
This is Sharon. Oftentimes they are going to say that, not only to protect themselves, they don't want the retaliation to be greater, and oftentimes the embarrassment that comes with being victimized. I think on that part, it's almost investigating the problem and going to outside sources to find out what's going on in the situation, and also really having the private conversation. Once again, people within the school not approaching the target or victim directly in front of others, validating that you understand what they're going through has to be hard, and that you really just want to try to help and support them. But know that that first attempt may not be received very well, and they will probably dismiss.
This is Judy again. And with it, it's baffling that sometimes we find that the targets are actually seeking out the people who are instigating the bullying. And so that child who is the target of bullying and insists that, oh, this is just part of a friendship, might need to have some coaching as to what is an appropriate and respectful friendship, that certain behaviors should not be acceptable. Help empower that children, build their self-esteem, and help them shape their relationships and how they feel, how should be appropriate to treat one another.
Exactly, and then also letting them know, not all attention is okay attention. Sometimes I think they're seeking that, whether just attention at all feels good, even if it's negative.
Mm-hmm. And adults should be making those judgments. We should not leave that always to the children. If they say, oh, this is okay, we like hitting each other, it doesn't matter.
Right.
We're the adults. Some of the kids actually engage in this game where where the males are punching one another, and there's this contest to see, who can stand up and not buckle under the pain of being hit. And they're all agreeing to this behavior. It's still unacceptable, and we as the adults put a stop to it. No, you're not going to hit each other for entertainment, even if you all are in agreement. The answer is no. Find a different activity.
Clear expectations.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What is the difference between bullying and harassment?
This is Sharon. I think bullying as being the intended and thought out. Harassment is also, I see harassment in definitions. It is definitely targeted at a member being in a group, where the bullying, the targets of bullying is often referred to that they stand out different in some way, whereas harassment, someone is being picked on because of their membership in a group or, due to their orientation.
Yeah, harassment does seem to have that added layer of the group membership. So then you could, like, sexual harassment is bullying that is also sexualized. Anti-gay harassment, disability harassment. I think one of the earlier questions that you raised was, what if bullying is attached to one's membership with the group? Could that rise to the level of a hate crime? And it does have broader ramifications because other members of that same group are going to see that if the harassment is being triggered because of the group membership, the other members of that group are going to feel equally as vulnerable and afraid that they might too be harassed.
Any other comments before I move to the final question? Okay, the final question is, how can our school access these resources and trainings?
This is Amy. I know I spoke quite a bit about a particular program, and I don't mean to just be promoting one. There's so many that are great out there. But I could certainly share some information about the one that we like so much, the Steps to Respect Bullying Prevention Program out of the Committee for Children on their website. It's easy to look at that. And I do know, again, that they are very similar and based on the same research as like the Ovaeus Bullying Prevention Program. Bully Proofing Your Classroom is another one that is good. There's a number of resources, and we can, if you go to the Committee for Children website, you can look up their program. And what was the latter part of that question again? I'm sorry. So how do we access the resources?
Yeah.
This is Sharon. First, knowing your population, because you definitely want to address the population at your school. But as Amy had said, there are several programs out there that follow similar formats in really just finding the one that would speak to the students and really the culture of your community.
Sharon, that was the most critical word, culture. Because anti-bullying is a culture, Mrs. Judy,
Yes.
that the entire school community needs to have a shared value that bullying is unacceptable. And when you have that school culture, then we can have the programs that supplement that and they help us launch it and infuse it into the campus. But really that culture is the most critical part.
And I have to add in, I don't know that one program is going to speak to every audience. I know when I go in and do workshops or lectures with our private school setting as opposed to our public school, it's just a different audience, and you don't want to have them shut down because you're presenting something that is not relevant to their atmosphere. I mean, there is an undertone, singular message that you want to send, but you also need it to be very prevalent to that audience.
Also, I think schools that practice the positive behavioral interventions and support model, where they already have this sort of structure for coming together and defining what they do value and what they do expect, and then teaming to address problem behaviors. Those schools seem to be much more successful in when they do take on a bullying prevention program, and whether it be a program or just the issue itself and what they're going to do about it. So I think bullying prevention fits very well with the PBIS model.
Okay, does anyone have any final closing thoughts or words you'd like to share with our audience?
Just thank you for being here and keep up and do the good work.
Absolutely. Yes. And Judy, like you said earlier, this is Amy, I want to thank you and Sharon and Marcy for teaming on this topic, and it was a great experience for me, and I think it is such an important topic, and glad that people are interested in addressing it. Thank you.
And to piggyback off that, I have to say the same thing, and just very happy for all those in the audience that have made this such a successful, and hopefully get the culture in the community out there to change and realize that this is a problem.
Well, in closing, I'd like to thank Dr. Judy Chasen, Amy Foster Wolferman, Sharon Hino, and Marcy Otten for sharing this wonderful information, and to the audience for joining us. Please remember to complete the post-presentation evaluation. The next Schools and Trauma presentation, Sudden Death on a School Campus, Impact and Response, will take place on October 27th. On that note, we hope you'll join us for the next speaking event. Please visit us at the course homepage for more information. Thank you all.